So you ever been asked to go somewhere with a friend and you really didn't want to do the thing they invited you to, but because of FOMO, you went and then you almost instantly regretted it? That's what we're going to talk about today.
Welcome to WizNugs. Nuggets of wisdom can be found almost anywhere, and today's nugget comes from the field of economics. Specifically, the book Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. Now, this is an older book, but it's got really just the one simple lesson.
I've never read the book. What is the one simple lesson?
To sum it up in one phrase, it would be to consider both the seen and the unseen when you're making decisions. The book begins with an illustration in the first chapter of what's referred to as the broken window fallacy.
Okay.
It goes something like this. If a shopkeeper's window gets smashed, whether by hooligans or a storm or whatever, the window's broken, he needs to replace it. So he spends money that he's got in savings and replaces the window. There are people that are going to look at this and say, well, this is good for the economy because now the window guy is going to have more business. Now that the window guy has business, he can go to the clothing store and buy a new sweater. And then the clothing guy can go to the supermarket and buy groceries for his family. And now the supermarket guy can pay the farmers more. And money just circulates through the economy. And this is good for everybody because it's spending. And after all, isn't that what's important?
It sounds like that's kind of like the glass is half full kind of mentality.
Sure. I mean, it's not wrong, right? You can see why this would be intriguing or appealing.
But they don't take into the account about the shop owner who had his window broken.
Right. So this is the second half of it, the unseen.
Okay.
What would the shopkeeper have done with his savings if he hadn't had to spend the money on a new window? He would have had a window and the money.
And he could have invested it like back into his store, his business.
Or he might have gone to get a new sweater anyway with it. And then the money, then the clothing store guy would have gone to the grocery store. And then the money still goes all the same places. The only person missing out on that in this case would be the window guy.
Money still goes back into the economy and things keep moving forward.
In the case of the shopkeeper, the reason why this is a fallacy of economic logic is it doesn't actually increase. Something got destroyed.
Right.
And it's lost. And the value of that first window will never be recovered.
So at best, it's a balancing act. And it may not even be quite right. I mean, maybe the original window cost half as much when it was installed. And now we have twice the cost.
And ultimately, if we think about cost only in terms of money, then we're kind of missing another big part of this.
Right.
In economics, they refer to the thing that's given up as the opportunity cost. It's the thing you didn't do that you could have done. In this case, the opportunity cost is what the shopkeeper would have spent his money on if he didn't need to buy a new window.
So if I was to apply that to my life, that would be like, I want to go out with my friends to watch a movie, but that means I have to sacrifice having dinner with my family.
Sure. There's going to be the thing that you give up, the thing that you go and do. One tool that I learned about recently to help make decisions easier is, it's going to sound a little old-fashioned, but it's your basic pros and cons list.
Okay.
Now, the reason why I say I just learned about this is that there's a kind of a twist on it, that if you're comparing a couple of different options, you might put them both on the same pros and cons list, making kind of like a Punnett square that you would make in science class when you're talking about dominant and recessive genes.
Yeah, I remember that. Yep.
So basically, you end up with pros and cons at the top still, and then on the side, you put the two different activities that you're comparing. Now, the pros of going to the movies with your friends might include spending more time with your friends, getting to see a movie. The pros of having dinner with your family might be more time spent with family.
And then the pro on the one side can become a con on the other, right?
Right. So now the con of going to the movies would be you're missing out on time with your family. The con of having dinner with your family would be you're missing out on time with your friends.
Right.
Seeing these things compared can help you to guide that decision in a way that is meaningful for you instead of just considering one option in isolation. If you've considered your options and you're still not sure, another cool trick that you can do is the good old-fashioned coin toss. Now again, this is not a new trick.
Sure.
But the new angle on it is once you've assigned, movies to heads and dinner with family to tails, you flip the coin and you see what you get. You see what chance gives you. And then you notice how you feel about that.
Yeah, so like for instance, it lands on heads and you're like, well, you know what? I really don't want to see that movie. I would rather spend some time with my family. I now know that given that this was the choice I would have made because of the flip, I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to go spend time with my family because that now let me know that no, this actually means more to me and I would rather do this thing.
Yeah, sometimes it just takes the decision being made for you to realize that's not really what I want. I want the other thing. And that's okay.
Right.
Especially before you've actually made the decision, before you've bought the movie tickets and made plans and all that.
I like to liken that to when you're trying to decide what you want to have for lunch and you're like, oh, do I want Taco Bell? Do I want, pizza? Do I want whatever? And then you go have the thing and you're like, I should have got pizza.
Sure. And that's the funny thing. Like every decision that we make is always the thing that we wanted most at that time.
Right.
It made the most sense to us in that moment. It's only afterward that we can say, oh, I regret that decision.
Yeah.
Reminds me of this catchy phrase I came across recently. It goes something like this. If you always do what is easy, your life will be hard. But if you do what is hard, your life will be rewarding.
Now, I've heard it expressed in another way, and that's the live your life that few are willing to live in order to have a life that few are able to have.
Yeah.
To me, this has a personal meaning. When I got out of military, I went into retail, grocery business. And I thought, well, I like this. I like working with people. I think I'm going to do this as a career. I got to year 10 of doing it and decided, nope, I don't want to do this anymore. This is not taking me to where I want to go.
But that's such an investment of time. Surely you stayed longer.
So I had to stay longer to get myself through college, but I knew that that was not my future. My future was going to be somewhere else. Now, I remember it as a child. I had a little small personal computer. Again, it wasn't anything that was fancy at the time. It wasn't a Commodore 64 or anything of that nature. It was a very old device called Intellivision Aquarius. And it played games, cartridge games, but it also had basic code format in it. And you could write code that made the man run across the screen, kaleidoscopes and clocks. Anyway, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to learn how to become a computer programmer. But that meant sacrifice. Not only did it mean sacrificing my career that I currently had and I was comfortable with, so it also meant sacrifice with time with family because I was to work full time still and I was going to school full time. And so we had to do this odd juggling act in order to make things work. Sometimes I took the kids with me to work. Sometimes I took the kids with me to school. Or sometimes we would meet in the middle and we do a kid exchange. Whatever we needed to do in order to be able to make it happen. So there was a lot of sacrifice involved. And again, I was used to working in the retail business and I loved the people aspect of it. I didn't like a lot of the other aspects that came with it. Working holidays, working nights, basically being called almost any day that you were off to have to come in. You had to sacrifice time that way. And it's like, well, I'm already sacrificing time with my family, time that could be spent with them to make this organization happy. I'd rather be in a position where I can control that, at least have better control and work somewhere where weekends and nights are not really ever in consideration. And holidays and being able to spend the holidays with the kids. That was never possible in retail business. So I had to make a lot of sacrifices. It was sacrifice of career. It was a sacrifice of family time for a short time until I got done with college and was able to move on into a career in programming.
It sounds like you were giving up something that was comfortable for something better. It was easy. It would have been easy to stay, but it would have been, dare I say, soul crushing.
And I think a lot of times, a lot of people get into a position because they spent a lot of time somewhere and like, well, this is what I have to do now because this is where I spent my time or this is what I went to school for. And they find themselves not happy in a particular career and they feel like, well, the opportunity costs of what I could have done are gone now and I'm stuck here and I just keep doing this until I die or something happens. But it's still possible to make decisions. Yes, there's going to be costs involved. But if it gets you to where you want to be in the future and to having a better position, it's worthwhile.
Reminds me of another concept from economics known as the sunk cost fallacy.
All right, now this I don't know.
The idea here is a sunk cost is money that you've already put into it, or time, or effort, or whatever. You've already put that into your career in retail. 10 years in retail, that's not nothing.
Right.
To walk away from that, you've invested so much in this. Surely you can't walk away now. But if it's not rewarding and it's not taking you where you want to go, then giving it up is a positive thing. Moving away from it is a good thing. The sunk cost fallacy would have you believe that because you've already invested time and effort in it, that you need to stay there.
Fortunately, I never felt that way. I never felt like, well, I'm throwing this all away just so take a risk. I was like, the risk is worthwhile because I know that this is dead end for me.
That's kind of what I was getting at, is that ultimately there's risk either way. There's a risk in staying and there's a risk in going.
And there was no guarantee that I was going to be good at it. It was the risk of finding out. You know, it was nice to know that this is a fallback. It's something I can always lean on, right? Because having at least customer service skills used to be worthwhile. It's hard to say now that, you know, because of the work that I've done in retail, I'm very picky about customer service, whether it's at a grocery store or fast food restaurant or anywhere where customer service is part of the job. And it's easy for me to pick out this person is not happy being here. And I can know why, because I felt the same way.
This reminds me of Brene Brown, TED Talk that she did a couple of years ago on vulnerability.
Okay.
Specifically, the kind of core concept that I got out of it was lean into discomfort.
Right.
That's the way to get through struggle, is to lean into it.
I've heard it mentioned as face your fear.
And the Stoics would describe it as the obstacle is the way. When there's an obstacle in your path that looks like it's blocking you from moving forward, the way forward is confronting that obstacle. And it's through that struggle that you're going to grow and that you're going to be able to move forward.
Right.
A lot of times we have this tendency to avoid discomfort and to see an obstacle and say, well, that's it. That's a sign not to move forward. I better just turn the other way and go back to what I was doing before. But you'll find that you'll grow stronger when you confront that. You'll at least discover more about who you are.
This goes back to last week's episode. We talk about tempering, and you temper yourself. Yeah, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a struggle. It's going to be a fight. It's going to be confrontation. But you come out of it stronger, better, tougher. And being able to know, like, well, I always had this fear about this particular thing. I was able to get through it. And now I know that if it comes up again, I can face it and rise to the challenge.
So it strikes me that the cure to FOMO is having confidence in the decisions that you've made. So if you're working towards something that's a real goal, that's meaningful to you, then it doesn't matter what else is going on around you. It doesn't matter what you're missing out on, because you're doing what you need to do to get where you need to go.
And you may not recognize that immediately, but somewhere down the road, when you are at the destination that you want to be at, you'll be able to look back and say, yep, it was totally worth it. So we get familiar with the idea of opportunity cost, even if we don't really address it in those terms. When we're kids, when we're teenagers, when we decide that I want to spend my time doing a particular event and not doing the things that maybe I should be doing. For instance, I get out of school, the first thing I want to do is come home and play video games. I don't care about housework. I don't care about schoolwork. I don't care about the big project that I'm supposed to work on. I don't care about any of that stuff. I care about, I want to spend the time the way that I want to spend it, and to heck with everything else. And then you go in there, and then you have to wait for the responsible adult. Hopefully there's one there.
Sure.
To come over and tell you, like, hey, did you work on your schoolwork? You know that you have chores that you need to get done, right? You don't expect an allowance here if you're not going to do your work, and then you have to make choices. I don't want to give up my video game time, but I really want to have that new skateboard, and I can't afford it unless I get my allowance. The only way I get my allowance is by having to do the stuff that I was told I need to do. Fine.
To go along with that, if you don't do your project, if you don't do your homework, then your grades are going to suffer. You're not going to learn the things that you need to learn to do well in school. That there's consequences of all this. It harks back to if you do what's easy now, things are going to be hard later.
Right. And so it goes back to that term, sacrifice. And again, we don't think of it as sacrifice as children or teenagers. It's just the stupid stuff I got to do. right? Stupid stuff I have to do in order to be able to get the things that I want. We don't actually term it as a unseen cost. We don't term it as sacrifice, but that's what it is. And we don't recognize that this is really making us a better version of us. It takes time and a little bit of wisdom, if you will, to be able to recognize that the choices that I thought were, pains in my butt to have to do, and I had to give up the things that I wanted to do these other things, actually got us on the path that we needed to be on.
Another mental exercise that I find helpful in this is I heard it termed "eat the frog."
I've never heard that one.
This is imagine the worst thing that you have to do all day. Every day you have to eat a live frog.
Yeah, that would be pretty disgusting.
And so if you liken this to the frog is now the worst thing that you have to do that day. It might be the project that you want to work on. It might be that someone found a bug in your code that you've been working on trying to fix that bug for the last 2 weeks.
And where's the frog?
You got
the frog.
You got to figure out where that bug is to be able to fix it. Maybe this is personal experience. I don't know. But if you plan on doing the hardest thing that you've got on your plate first, then the rest of the day, you know that you've accomplished something and you've tackled the hardest thing first.
My wife practiced this mentality, not saying those particular words or phrase, with my kids whenever they had to eat dinner. There would be 2 or 3 things on their plate. And my son was, when he was younger, very picky. When he got older, I'll try anything. But at the time, it was, okay, I know you don't particularly care for this one item that's on your plate. Eat the thing that you like the least first. Save the thing that you like the most last. Because then you're eating the thing that the last thing you leave from your plate is you enjoy this. This is the great thing. This is the awesome thing. I got through the cruddy thing first and I'm done with it. I don't have to deal with it anymore. So in summation, we're going to have a lot of choices in our life. And a lot of times those choices are going to be very hard to make. But if it's a choice that puts you on the path that you want to be on to get to where you want to be in life, make that decision. Yes, there are going to be things that you miss out on, but don't let that be the deterrent that keeps you from where you want to be.
Thanks for joining us on WizNugs. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us today on WizNugs. If you liked what you heard, spread the word. For more information, head over to mywiznugs.com.